Hello and welcome, I'm Tafarag Adamu. My guest today, Dr. Malka Shabtai, an Israeli anthropologist and filmmaker, has been in and out of Ethiopia for the last 40 years. Her research work that covered the Beit Israel of Kachane here in Addis Ababa and North Shoa has culminated in a book, The Hidden Jews of Ethiopia, and a documentary film titled Nafcot. Dr. Malka Shabtai, a very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
This past weekend, you screened your film Nafcot, loosely translated longing. Longing.
Yeah.
It's all about the Ethiopian Jews, the pains, the trials and tribulations that they have to go through, and sometimes the hopes and beautiful things that happen to them in this country. It's a mix of both, correct?
Nafcot, meaning yearning, deal with the story of the Beta Israel Baalij community as they are known in Ethiopia. It tells a story of a persistent community that hold to their identity and beliefs since the first temple. While they are living in Ethiopia for all these years and going through many challenges and difficulties, holding to these traditions because of prejudice, some persecution, and some other issues that are dealt with within the community, within the larger society. But it is an amazing story of people that still live their deep belief that one day, when the days will come, they will return to the place where they eventually came from. This is Jerusalem.
Persistent in their beliefs, you just said. Isn't that a little bit of an overstatement, if you will? Because many of them through the ages have changed their religion from Judaism to what? To Orthodox Christianity and to other religions, not
So
exactly
let
this
me
case in
point out-
Ethiopia.
Let me point out two aspects to it. First of all, they are Baalij. They are working as weavers, pottery, blacksmiths, and so on. In the Ethiopian traditions, popular traditions, not only to this community, but we found it like in the research of Dr. Alula Pankhurst throughout the South. People in this country that are involved with artwork considered to be budoch, considered to be people who has the evil eye and can affect other people to become sick or die or so on.
You're talking about artisans.
Yes, artisanians, yeah. So first of all, they suffer from this popular belief that connect art and the evil eye in this country. They are not the only community, but it's addressed to them. The second issue that we find is throughout history, there was a lot of attempts by the Orthodox Church mainly to convince them to get rid of their ancient traditions and get involved and become part of the majority of the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia. Many gave up. Many joined because of all this suffering to the Orthodox Church. But a group or some of them hold to their traditions and are not willing to give up. By the way, I cannot describe this to details right now, but actually in the last few days, we face again another attempt to convince the leaders of the hidden synagogues to give up on their traditions and to fully join the Orthodox Church. So this is still, these days, happening. So a community that suffer from both sides, being an artist and not accepting Jesus Christ and holding to their ancient traditions, are in the center.
Are they forcing them or are they trying to attract them?
Yeah.
Because these are two
Actually,
different things.
It's two things. Is forcing by persecution.
That's you think that is happening now as we speak?
Right now.
What are the means?
I cannot go into it right now. I'm sorry. It is too delicate. It is a life of people, but this is happening these days. Just this week, I was invited for a meeting to discuss that. Okay? What I want to tell you, that still in the rural area mainly, they both suffer because they are Baalij, and they both suffer because they reject or the general, traditional, wrong perception. They are blamed, as all the Jews blamed, for killing Jesus, which is untrue. But they are still suffering because of these ideas and ideologies.
I feel for some reasons that times have changed and old means cannot be used as we speak now because it's a totally different milieu, time-wise, space-wise, and so on. So
let me give you another example. Many people don't believe that this still exists, but this is the daily life of the community. In regards to burial, they don't have a place to be buried. There is no Jewish cemetery in Ethiopia. They struggle to bury their people in remote areas. But the other thing, Ethiopia of today is a democratic, very well-aware country of education, right? Education is mandatory. But the children of this community don't go to school, not in Kachane, but in the rural area in Semi and Shoa, because of prejudice.
Prejudice is an important factor in this conversation.
Exactly.
Persecution is a little bit too extreme, and that's why now that you don't want to talk about it, let's move forward. And how many people are you talking about, Ethiopian Jews?
It is this specific community is estimated to be between 120 to 150,000 people throughout Semi and Shoa. And as I said, this is the iceberg of the existence of other remains of the Beta Israel communities throughout Ethiopia through history. And some have been lost forever. Some still trying to get in touch. So this is the current situation.
It's interesting. When is the census from?
The source of the census has been done by two people. One is one historian of this community, and the second is actually a person that is previously from the community and right now is part of the Orthodox Church. So we have two angles to the same issue, but this is what we have now.
How about the Ethiopian Jews in the north? I'm talking about in Gondar and part of Tigray as well.
There are still other Jewish communities, Beta Israelot, in the Gondar area and in Tigray for sure, and in other places, in Lasta, in Kobo, in Jama, and all around Jama River and all. But as you know, the majority of Gondar and Tigray made it to Israel. In Tigray, we know of specific community that they have relatives from first degree in Israel. They are still there for some reasons that are now taken care of. But even in South Tigray, in other places, there are communities.
So are you talking about the Falashamura?
No. This is a whole different issue, but let me first correct you. There is no concept like Falashmura. The right concepts are Felesmura, Faresmukra, Miriam Wodet. That relate to people that are originally from Beta Israel and actually live mixed life, syncretism. Because although some of them accepted some of the Christian symbols, like going with cross, like their surrounding, they are still identified by others as foreigners, are unaccepted.
As the other.
Yeah, so they are still having significant other identity, which is between the original Jewish tradition and the Christianity that has not been fully integrated. So what I'm saying, the different group of people that are from the Beta Israel at large are in different states in the religious level. But socially speaking, all those who are still practicing artwork, like pottery, weaving, ironwork, blacksmiths, and even leather smoothing, are suffering from the same social relation and stigma that connect them to the evil eye, which all knows that it's untrue, and it's even getting more extreme because I myself watched on Ethiopian television an art program, theater, which imitating the Beta Israelot turning to be hyenas at night. So it is such a large-scale popular belief that this what caused the hate, the harm, the damage. It cost people life. People are killed for who they are, still now.
You travel to these places. I mean, you come to Gachane here in Addis Ababa and do your field work, right, from time to time, including working on your film, your documentary. And also you travel to Northern Shoa, right? So in Northern Shoa, where specifically are the Beta Israel?
Okay, for the last 4 years, I'm coming to Ethiopia every few months and visiting and learning the community And with their decision, we made a film. It was a leadership of the community who decided that it's time to come out and tell this story and struggle for the rights. So personally, I visited Debre Berhan, Inwari, Fiche, Alem Ketama. I still didn't visit Mahal Meda. So these are the main cities in which there are communities, neighborhoods of the community. But around them, there are the secret synagogues. Now, to tell the facts are that the late Professor Richard Pankhurst, who actually introduced me to this community 28 years ago in a conference in Venice, now, because of all the reasons I described already, only 15 left.
15
Some secret synagogues. And they are struggling to survive, to keep their identity, to continue their practices. But unfortunately, because of all the social pressure, the elderly people of the community decide, I would say, hide part of their traditions from the younger generation. So the young generation of the community know who they are, but are not all familiar with all the ancient practices.
What are these practices that you're talking about?
What are the practices? The practices
That they are hiding.
No, they cannot practice them here in Addis, for example, only in the secret synagogues. The Sabbath, purity laws, a special holiday like Terabatachin, and other Jewish traditions, very ancient, Tukutubet, Kizotbet, Jewish traditions that are from the first temple. But the young generation has not been allowed to visit these secret places, so it will not revealed, because the young generation, those who live, for example, in Addis Ababa, are educated, are teachers, are bank workers, are pilots, are in all kinds of jobs, besides of those who continue the weaving and pottery and the others. And this community actually looked for a strategy of survival. And a part of the strategy of survival was to build up this secret synagogue in very remote and inaccessible area, in Semyon Shoah, and the second strategy was internal, inside the community, is not to fully let the young generation be part of these traditions until they grow up, and then they can go there.
So they are artisans, and are they also farmers?
Very small of part of the community, having small lands that were given to them in the other regime. So each secret synagogue has small land for self-sustain, very small. So most of them are bailage. We have other Beta Israel communities throughout Ethiopia that, because of all kind of political relocations throughout time, for example, we had a community in West Walaga that have been moved there through the time of the Kifukan, and they were moved from Gondar to West Walaga and had land.
So where else are these? Other than, they are in the Amhara region, they are in Tigray, they are also in Oromia. Where else? Do we have them in the south? Or you haven't explored that yet?
We know that in the south there are very ancient remains of the Beta Israel. In the south they are called Fuga. But, for example, the Fuga people, half of them became Christians, half of them become Muslims. But once a year, they have one day that they all get together. I've not been there yet, unfortunately. Ethiopia is big, it takes time. But what I'm saying, that there are remains of the ancient Beta Israel that came to Ethiopia through different times and different places. But we believe that this time, all Ethiopia and the Beta Israel within the Ethiopian society should move to the next stage.
Which is?
Open, inter-religious dialogues, fighting and giving up prejudice to each other, to everyone, enjoying the enrichments of multiculturalism, which each group contribute to this country. Just for example, the Baalij are the Artesania people. They have a crucial role into Ethiopian society. All people wear their clothes, using their pottery, using their iron products, yes? But they still socially another class.
So what is the probability of these people, like you mentioned, the Fuga and others who have changed their religion into Christianity, whether you call it Orthodox Christianity or probably Catholicism as well, or some other religion, what is the probability that these people would come back to reclaim their original religion, to Judaism? Is that a probability, you think?
My estimation, without personally visiting this community, for example, that for many it is too late. They have their meaningful life of their choice in the present, religiously, socially. I don't know enough. I'm not into it.
But when you talk to these people, whoever you've talked to, while you're doing your research, do people tell you that this is it? We're not coming back to Judaism? We are already...
I never heard anything very concrete like that. I more heard different groups that are more in distance, more isolated, have not been in touch, not with people from Israel or the other Jewish diaspora, but they are begging or asking to get a hand to find a way to return. Now, when these people approach me, I tell them very simply and straightforward, you are Ethiopian citizens, you should receive your religious and civil rights here. There is one established community in Kachane you should attach to. And if you want to return to the tradition of your forefathers, it's going to be a very, very long journey. Not easy, very complex, both in Ethiopia and in Israel. And we believe that we should put our efforts in development, in education, in better social and economic life as Ethiopian citizens. This is our strategy.
And how do they react to your engagement along that line?
They understand. They understand that because of historical circumstances, they have gone through different paths. They got lost. They lost leadership. They lost practices. They have been isolated. But they get hope from what is happening with Kachane and Semyon Shoah, and they accept the emphasis on fighting for the rights in Ethiopia. And as I mentioned before, we are in a very advanced process under the auspices of the mayor of Addis Ababa, which promised to the previous ambassador that she would take care of the rights of her citizens from the Beta Israel, allowing them or helping them to fulfill the basic rights of Jewish cemetery, of a land for worship and synagogue, for a cultural center. And even though she promised to give airtime on formal national Ethiopian television, because she believed, and she told all of us that she believed that it's time to share the story. So when people listen and hear and get to know people in a more personal way, that's another way to struggle prejudice.
How are these people, how are the Ethiopian Jews viewed? I mean, the Beta Israel here in Kachane and also in Northern Shoah, by the Beta Israel in Israel?
First of all, I work closely with the elderly, the religious leaders of Beta Israel in Israel, the Kesoch and the rabbis of the community. They all tell me immediately, Yikarta, Malka. They tell me that these are their Zemedoch. They all tell me that they know the story of the Kachane and Semyon Shoah community from childhood, from their forefathers. But there was geographical disconnection of these areas, of the Gondar area and the Semyon Shoah. Although you can see that they are close on the map, there were issues there and the strategy of the community to hide. They all tell me that they are waking up now to take responsibility of their sisters and brothers. I just opened the corridor, but it's their responsibility. And let me mention that a month ago, the heroes of my film, Mr. Balai Netazebku, Mikael Moges, and Abera Teshomi, who is the hero of the film, were in Israel. I invited them. They came to Israel for the inauguration of the film, and they met a lot of the Kesoch and the other leaders, and we know now the connection has been done. Now it will take time, kas bekas, to create this, to create more collaboration between the young generation and older generation. Do
the Beta Israel in Israel, the Ethiopians, feel that their relatives from here, from the, as you said, relatives and brothers and sisters in Kachane and elsewhere in North Shoah, be covered by the Aliyah?
Aliyah is not an issue right now, okay? we all agree that Aliyah is not an issue. Right now, we want to keep this community here with all the rights and get stronger. But what has been opened, by the way, a lot through my film, I screened the film 3 times in Israel. And in each screening, there were many of Beta Israel colleagues, friends, Kesoch, that came to see the film. The young generation reaction is, we discovered our relatives, our lost relatives. They want to come here. They want to visit. They approach me on a daily basis. How can they help? How can they connect? The elderly people, the religious leaders say it's time for us to take responsibility. We need to send teachers, Kesoch, volunteers, to help the community to get stronger. And we are now negotiating with the Israeli ambassador what can be done in Ethiopia. I am collaborating with many Ethiopian colleagues that are already aware of the community to do some work here. Just one idea, we are hoping to create a youth village with very best quality of education to all Ethiopian children. Our approach is inclusive. All Ethiopian children that need better educational opportunities, whether it's in Kachane or Debra Berhan, where we operate as well, we want to work together. And many organizations approached me after watching the film. We want to work with you. We want to collaborate. And so new era has been opened.
So what else do the Bet Israel tell you in Israel? I mean, there is lots of stories concerning those folks out there being suffering from some form of racism because of the color of their skin. And on several occasions it was very serious.
Yeah, I think this is a altogether another issue.
No, I know, but now that you're here, I just want...
We can talk a lot about it. I can tell you, following my 40 years of involvement with the Beta Israel in Israel, I can tell you that there is issue of prejudice according to color, like it is anywhere else in the world. But I can tell you more than that the achievements of Ethiopian Jews in Israel, in one generation, there is no other example of it in the world. One of my PhD students, Salomon Akale, in Israeli Ethiopian, who is now completing his PhD, show us that in one generation, people who came to Israel illiterate completely are now holding master and PhD degrees because of a large-scale affirmative action.
No, I know, but this is not to say that there is no racism in Israel.
There is racism all over the world.
No, I know, but when it comes to a particular case of the Ethiopian Jews,
that's what I said.
They do.
Some people experience some situations of racism. But what I want to tell you, that you should look at the larger picture. The larger picture is the achievements, the opportunities that Ethiopian Jews got in Israel in 1 or 2 generations. I don't think that there is another example of like this in the world. And I have one simple suggestion for you. Why don't you invite to your wonderful program some of my colleagues, Ethiopian Jews from Israel, that are often visiting Ethiopia, that are getting involved with different projects. Our ambassador, who is an Ethiopian Israeli, who is the ambassador of Israel in Ethiopia. By the way, we have another ambassador whose origin is Ethiopian Jews, Beta Israel, my colleague Shimon Salomon, ambassador of Israel in Angola, Mozambique, and Congo, and many other high positions throughout the country.
I definitely will do that. It will be a very interesting topic. I mean, yeah.
I will help you to get in touch with all of them.
Thank you. Malka Shabtai, it was really a pleasure having you on my show. Thank you very much indeed for getting here.
Batama Mesagenalo.